Hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your critique of the week for Friday, December 24th, Christmas Eve. Happy Merry Christmas to all those who celebrate the holiday. Looking forward to a great critique. As always, the goal of these is to give that workshop experience to people who might not have the opportunity, and etc., etc. It really is an important thing, though, to be able to see how your poems look through the eyes of strangers, and it's hard to find that sometimes, and so that's what we do here at the old critique of the week. So please do leave your comments, any feedback you might have, suggestions, anything like that. We have two poets we're looking at today. The poets are Nicole, Amador, and Kimberly, McNeil. So, let's just dive right into these poems here. Let's see what we got. Okay. So, I should make sure everything's working too. Yeah, so let's see. So over on YouTube, hello to James Langford, D. Coleman, Nate Jacobs, Spartacus, Dick Westheimer, Clayton Clark. Good to see you all. And then over on Facebook, do we have... See, Facebook is still giving me lots of trouble. Let's see if I refresh this page. There we go. So we got Mark Grenier, Dana Broadhead, Louis Perch Villamere. Good to see you all. Okay, so that looks like it's working on both of those platforms. Over on Twitter... Just a reminder, if you're watching on Twitter, you can tweet comments and stuff if you want, but I won't really see them during the show. So go find us on YouTube or Facebook if you'd like to participate. Okay, so here are we have two poems from Nicole Amador, and then we have three short ones from Kimberly McNeil, which I think we'll probably do all three because they're pretty short. There are some questions that Nicole asked, which are sort of general type questions. So maybe we'll do those after we look at the poems. They're more about like submitting and things like that, which we haven't talked about in a long time. So it's good questions to have, just general how things work. But let's look at the poems. So the first one is Sludge. And again, this is Nicole Amador. There's a place inside of us we sometimes share when we want someone to think we have bared our soul to them. And if that is what our soul is, when it is bared, then it's bearable. But it's not. If we are well, there's a place deep down we can rest. The notch is just right. We are suspended, but not at risk of falling. But it's not the bottom, where sludge sticks to your shoes, making feet damp, heavy, sloshing ahead to shake the fear as soon as your eyes adjust and you tuck the hair that was plastered onto your face behind your ear. You realize the sludge is moving slowly towards a grate you can't see past, only hear water moving in a tunnel. The sound like the shells at the beach that sound like the waves that sound like the shells that sound like the waves. The tide comes in, the tide goes out, and you are afraid because you think you are the sludge. That when really you are the ocean. That is Sludge. Interesting poem. You can kind of feel how the poem sort of like spins its wheels for a while, but then picks up when images start to come in, which we always talk about here. But it is true. You're painting a scene usually. I talked to Janice Harrington for the spring issue. She was talking about this because she's a storyteller, like a performative storyteller and a librarian in addition to everything else. And she was talking about how there's a relationship where the music of the language is transformed into images in the audience when you're storytelling, and you have to be really cognizant of the way those images are being created and played out as you tell the story, and that's the main thing. And it's because, as we always say, we're very visual creatures, and we think in images, and so those have the most salience. And so when the images start to come in later. Where the sludge starts sticking to your shoes down here. Once the images start to come in, the poem really takes off. The beginning, though, I feel like I don't really feel much going on. So Sludge is the title. I would just use regular capitalization, but that's a fine title. It sets up what's going on. There's a place inside of us we sometimes share when we want someone to think we have bared our soul to them. So anything that's like bared our soul, those kind of cliches, really, immediately as you read the poem, they kind of throw you out of the poem. They're there's two sort of ways people look at it. I think if you're just a reader, you see a cliche and it's boring is all. And so you don't feel as engaged. As an editor, you just see it and you're like, oh no, people are going to be bored. And so that you think like, oh, this poem isn't going anywhere. And so it's a disservice because the poem takes off and goes interesting places later. So I would really get rid of all this beginning. Let's see, the soul is bared, and then it's bearable. There's some little sort of play between the bared and bearable and things like that, but it's not really, it doesn't really do much. There's not really much to offer. There's no image. There's no, unique way of thinking. There's no perspective. There's no grounding of what's going on, setting up a scene. There's really nothing going on in this first thing. I would just cut this whole thing. And we talk a lot about, like in the Rattlecast, you can talk to people, and the number one thing everybody does, and what we do as editors, is cut off the first stanza or the last stanza. The first where it's explaining and everybody's spinning their wheels, and you just don't recognize that it's not doing anything. Or the end where people tend to explain too far through the poem, and So Nate Jacob says the first poem ended well. The shell echoing the sea is nice, and the final stanza is a really good piece of writing. And T.R. Paulson says the beginning of the poem is true, but feels like the poem is trying to find itself. Exactly, that's a good way to put it. And T.R. Paulson also says, I thinking you are a sludge. That's where the energy of the poem is. And yeah, I agree too. Once that image comes in and you start to feel it, that's where the poem takes off. So let's cut this beginning at least. But it's not, so we can cut that. If we are a well, it could start here, I think. At least a well, is a start to the image. I'd like to see the well a little bit more. It wasn't really clear in my mind's eye what was going on at this point when I first read it. Only thinking back later to the sludge, talking at the bottom, I realized, oh, it's like that kind of well, and that's what's going on. But it didn't really put me there right away. So maybe, let's see, if we are well, there's a place deep down. We can rest the notches just right. We are suspended, but not at risk of falling. So I would like to, I'd like to see this better. So show us a little more detail of this well. Just describe it a little bit. If we are a well, and then we are a well that looks like this, and show the sides of it, what it looks like in your imagination. One of the things that you kind of don't realize is that, things that are really clear in the writer's imagination are end up ambiguous in the reader's imagination, unless there's enough detail to sort of trigger our sort of spontaneous generation of images, right? So if there's not enough image going on to start that, we end up in this sort of like nebulous place where we don't, I keep doing that, I dropped my pen cap again. But anyway, we end up in this like nebulous place where we don't actually start creating images. We don't start to feel in the scene yet. So describe this well a little bit. And I think this works for a beginning. So if it was called sludge, and we just jumped right in here, if we are well, which is a little bit, that can work, but describe it in detail here. But it's not the bottom. So I like the idea of being suspended there, but not at the bottom. Where sludge sticks to your shoes. Then we really get the poem taking off here, and then the ending later, which is good, which Nate Jacob talked about, where sludge sticks to your shoes, making feet damp, heavy, sloshing ahead to shake the fear. As soon as your eyes adjust and you tuck the hair that was plastered onto your face, behind your ear. Let me ask you something, just on the stream. Is the stream still freezing sometimes on Facebook, but not YouTube? I saw it happen out of the corner of my eye. I turned down the settings. Like I said earlier at the beginning of the show, Facebook has changed their dashboard, and ever since then, it's had this like freezing problem. And I turned down the bitrate and stuff, hoping that might fix it. So it's if my hand moves, it's a little more blurry than it used to be. I don't know, but let me know if it's still happening, and I'll play with the settings even more. It's really frustrating because it's turned to the settings it's supposed to be. It's underneath the max, and my connection is amazing. So I have like 1 gig fiber, and it's flying everywhere fast, and I have a fast computer. There's no dropped frames, so it shouldn't be freezing. It's all Facebook. Not freezing on YouTube, yeah. So anyway, so let me know if it is. But let's continue with the poem. Sorry, Nicole, for that sidetrack. But I want to figure this problem out, because I think if it's freezing a lot, just for a second, which is what it's doing, that really kind of kills your experience of the whole Rattlecast thing. Anyway, the hair that was plastered onto your face behind your ear, that's what you're tucking. You realize the sludge is moving slowly towards a grate. See, this is where it really picks off. When you realize the sludge is moving slowly towards a grate. And it's because we have the scene painted. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, anyway, so we had the scene painted. And then once things start happening in the scene, it really comes to life. And that's how the poem is working here. So it's moving slowly toward this grate. So you're getting this scene built, and then the sludge is moving in this, which is a kind of a strange description of, it's not something you'd really expect. So you start to see it play out, and it's working really well here. You can't see past, only hear water moving in a tunnel. Now this usually, this is sort of a novice type thing to do. A lot of times you'll see people do like, falling down, and then it'll fall down the page, and that kind of play, if you're doing like an E. Cummings kind of shtick where you're playing with how language looks on the page throughout the whole poem, that's totally good. But in a poem where it's the only time you're doing it, it's tough to do and pull off. It ruins your suspension of disbelief. Like you forget that, you forget that you're reading a poem as the image and the scene is building here with the sludge moving like we talked about. But then you remember that you're reading a poem when you get to something like this where you're just playing with how the words look on the page. So I would not do that. I would just like put it back to normal. I mean, there can be exceptions, and every rule is made to be broken. But in general, I would think that. Anyway, you can't see past, only hear water moving in a tunnel. The sound like the shells at the beach, that sound like the waves, that sound like the shells, that sound like waves. See, this is really cool. I like that play there. And then the tide comes in, the tide goes out, and you are afraid because you think you are the sludge when you're really the ocean. This is a little bit, I think the ending is a little too sort of, I don't know what the word, like on the note or something. It's a little too like explaining what we're doing here. And I think it's better just ending here, maybe. Like, you always want to allow some participation with the reader. Like, you want to sort of set up a way that we can engage with the poem and sort of come to a conclusion ourselves, because then we're participating and then it's more memorable. Like, we feel what's going on. Like, we're the speaker. We're in there. And so if you can convey something without the conclusion, I mean, maybe it could end at the afraid, too. But I think this is too, because you think you are the sludge and you're really the ocean. It's just too sort of, there's a word I'm thinking of, but I'm not a morning person, so the words don't come to me in the morning. It's like philosophizing or something. It's like the moral of the story is, what do you call that when you have the moralizing? I don't know, whatever. It's too much of that, and you don't want that. You want it, and something that lets the reader participate and be engaged with it. So I would end either at I think the afraid works, or just the image of the tide going in and out works. But there's some interesting stuff here. So a couple things maybe more to talk about. The layout of the poem, we have these one-word lines, very short lines, and then sometimes they're just one. It's not the bottom. And what this does to me is it slows down the reading and makes you really focus on the sounds of the words, where sludge sticks to your shoes, because you have this sort of automatic, just as your eyes scan back, pause, which you just can't help really reading, and so that just makes the reading a little slower, and which is just be aware of what you're doing. But I think it works for this sort of style of poem. Preaching, maybe that's the word I think Kathy Shea says. Yeah, preachy at the end. Yeah, and Tara Bowson says, this may just be me, but I'd rather see the tunnel stretched out by using language, not stretching out the word, unless you do more of this kind of thing in the poem, which is exactly what I said. Nate Jacobs talking about the Facebook sound keeps glitching. But maybe it's the bandwidth. Yeah, it could be. So people say so Jenny says the stream freezes every now and then on Facebook. Is that frustrating enough that you don't want to watch? Is that detrimental? I guess I should turn down, because I don't want to turn it down. Like right now, the settings are like YouTube could handle like twice as much, resolution, but I turn it down for Facebook's sake. Anyway. So yeah, so this poem sort of comes to life with the image. That's the main takeaway here. And that's sludge. And don't moralize at the end. So cut off the beginning at the end. See that this advice that we always give. And that always works. I mean, a lot of times it's the number one piece of advice is to cut off the beginning and the end, because you're spinning your wheels a little bit at first, and then at the end you're explaining too much. Those are sort of impulses that we have that we just have to get rid of. And it's great because you need to spin your wheels to get the poem going. So be prepared to have that all the time, because it does take a while to get into the poem and engage that sort of subconscious space in your mind where the poem is, where magical creation is happening, right? So it takes a while to get into that sort of zone, which you do. You can sort of see it take off, which is fun, the fun part of this poem. And so a lot of times we cut off the beginning, so don't feel bad about that. And then we always feel like, oh, I didn't explain it well enough. People aren't going to understand what I'm talking about. So let me explain what the moral of the story is at the end. And that just sort of ruins the engagement and the joy and the participation of it for the audience. So anyway, that's the first poem, Sludge. And let's look at the second. I think the second's a little shorter. Again, this is Nicole Amador. I'm hospitalized partially. One day my soul said no, not today. She left me in my own distraction and my own destruction, and that which others had created waved the white flag. Help me, help me, help me, help me, help me, please, please, please. Do you know what is wrong with me? Do you ever speak its name? Do I make you uncomfortable? Here, come, have some tea in a paper cup, not too hot. We only have plastic spoons here. No, you may not leave right now. Have some pretzels and apples juice. Come back and join the group. Let's draw a picture of what makes you strong. And let's talk about things, but let's not talk about the things. Let's write our goals for today. I will do 1 load of laundry. I will take my dog for a walk. I will not kill myself. And that is Hospitalized Partially. And again, this poem, you can sort of see the same thing happening a little bit. So Hospitalized Partially, we get a sense of the setting from the title, which is good. One day my soul said, and souls are one of those cliched things that you just, you want to get that out. No souls. That's the word no, by the way. Something else could say that, like something interesting. But the soul, I mean, there's some, again, every rule is made to be broken, and you can find ways to get it in, but you have to be really cognizant of the way that it's operating, and it's operating is especially at the very beginning, is saying, oh gosh, here's a soul again. So one day, something more interesting said, no, not today. She left me in my own distraction and my own destruction. And that which others had created waved the white flag. Help me, help me, help me, help me, help me, help me, please, please, please. And again, this is similar to the tunnel. Whereas if you're going to do things like this, so you want to do more of this or none of this? Like just doing this kind of thing one time, it's just a way to like throw you out of the poem. Like you're expecting more of that kind of play with the language, and it doesn't come. And so it's always in the back of your head, and it's a distraction. Is what the same thing as the tunnel stretching out was a distraction. It's a distraction squeezing all this in. I mean, it works a little better than the tunnel though, because it actually speeds up the way you say it and like the desperation. So it kind of works. It's almost like maybe you could leave it. But still be aware of that and think about it, I guess. Do you know what is wrong with me? Do you ever speak its name? I love this. For some reason, this do you ever speak its name is a great line. It's one of those really simple lines that has a lot of power underneath it. Do I make you uncomfortable? Here, come have some tea. So who is the you? Is the you, is this the soul? I'm a little confused about where the speech is. One day my soul said, because the soul is saying something. Is this whole thing a quote from the soul to like yourself? I'm not quite, it's not quite clear. Maybe somebody has an idea about that. Let's see. Yeah, so Nailima Karkana says, interesting poem. There's so many details you could add to this. It has a nice rhythm. It does, yeah. And what is the soul? Yeah, so if you do more with the soul, you could sort of play this up. Is the soul speaking the whole time? That's what I'm kind of... So when it says, do you ever know what is wrong with me? Is that the soul saying, like to me, to the speaker who's telling the story, right? Is that the soul speaking to the subject of the poem? And so that's who the you is. I'm just a little confused about who the you is. Do I make you uncomfortable? And who the I is? Like who? If that's the soul speaking the whole time, it makes sense. It's just not clear. And maybe, you could, if that's the way it is, you could, make quotation marks so it's like that or something, or italicize the whole thing, or set it off, or to make this the title. Actually, this might be a better title. So if this was the title, One Day My Soul Said, then we kind of get that this was a monologue from the soul, if that's what it's doing, but I actually don't know. But if that was the title, One Day My Soul Said, no, not today, that'd be a good start. So maybe make this the title. So maybe that's what I would do here, is make that the title. So Kathy Shea says, I see a nurse, but really unclear. Yeah, I was wondering, because there's the part about handing the cup. So it's not clear. Have some tea in a paper cup. But maybe the soul is like compelling you to get the tea too. And so that's why it's like, here, go get the tea that's sitting out for you, not too hot. We only have plastic spoons here. So there are really, and again, like in the last poem, once the details start coming, and I think I saw somebody, Clayton Clark here on YouTube said, I like the title, maybe start at, we only have plastic spoons here. And that's a possibility. And it's because that's again, where the images start to come out. That's where the poem starts to come alive. And the details are really, the apple juice, let's draw a picture, all this stuff. Like the details are what are pulling us in once again. So I think there could be more details. There's a lot you could describe again. And we really love that. Like human beings love hearing stories and being like set in another place and having that picture painted for us. That's what we're drawn to. And so tell more of it. And we'd really be hanging on your every word. So go ahead. And D. Coleman says, tea in a paper cup. We only have plastic spoons here, have pretzels and apple juice. Great images. Yeah, those are great images and details. And we could just keep going with that kind of thing. Like this is a really good example of what works. Let's draw a picture of what makes you strong. Let's talk about things, but let's not talk about the things. Let's write our goals for today. I will do 1 load of laundry. I will take my dog for a walk. I will not kill myself. And again, this is a little bit too heavy-handed at the end. So, because we kind of get what the hospitalization is for at this point anyway. And so, so maybe instead of just kill myself, maybe some kind of detail. Like if there was some kind of like suicidal ideation, maybe something to do with like what that actually was, or just some kind of where it's not this sort of big concept, but a smaller detail. It'll have a lot more power. So, yeah. Kathy Shea says, I balk at using the soul as a vehicle. Yeah, the thing is, like, veteran readers of poetry are really wary as soon as we see a soul, because it's just, it's a bit much. Let's see, over on Facebook, Lisa Ellison says, I'd like the details later. Too much pathos overall, perhaps. Pathos is a good word for the ending, too. I think the ending lines show the dichotomy of being in control of a situation and the nearness of losing mental clarity. Well, I agree. I like the setup. I think there's a better way to say that ending. I think that's too, it's just too blunt and not vivid, like it's not something that's sticky psychologically, even though it's something that has a lot of like emotional power. The emotional power of it doesn't come through, the emotional power of things is always like in the details, and there's not a detail here, which is the problem. So the power sort of can't be conveyed. It's almost like you need, like there's like electricity, but you need something to complete the circuit, or you need like lightning, a step leader to bring the lightning down from the clouds. Like there has to be that bridge, and the bridge is always concrete detail. In most cases, sometimes it can be voice and things like that, but usually it's concrete detail. And so it's a saying, if the voice of the speaker, if it was very clearly a monologue, something like "I will not kill myself" could work and sort of had the power there. But with the way it's written, I think it needs some more detail to make that connect. Let's see. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. So Dick Westheimer suggests moving the "I will not kill myself" up. Which and so if you said it would be a better ending if you said, let's write our goals for today. I will do 1 load of laundry. I will not kill myself. I will take my dog for a walk. And that juxtaposition there, where you sort of breeze over the important detail, is another way that would make it actually really work well. So that's a really great suggestion, Dick. Thanks. Let's see. Okay, so it's been a half an hour, and there's some questions here. There's some questions here that Nicole had, so let's answer them. So she asks, what are some welcoming places for new phase poets, poets who do not have an MFA? And I don't know, does anybody have any? I don't really have the lay of the land anymore. Like, I don't submit poems myself, and I don't pay attention to other editors. There's a great series that I liked that I was on. I was a guest on. What is it called? It is let's see. It's a YouTube series that Becky Touche or Touch, I don't know how to say her name, is doing, and she interviews a bunch of editors. And one of the things that sort of stands out, I have to say, is how much. It's called LitMag News Roundup. So if you type in Becky, Tuch, Becky Touch or Touche, LitMag News Roundup is a thing. And you can have interviews with editors, and you can see how sort of grounded certain ones are. And one of the things that really stands out, though, is that it is, almost everybody is in an MFA program or teaching. It's unusual to find any editors in the series that are not. So I don't know, does anybody have any suggestions for literary magazines that are less academically oriented? That's what Rattle was founded to be, was that it was a place that was not academically oriented, but still appreciated, complexity and things like that. So Lisa Allen says Twitter writing community is hashtag writing community is very supportive. On Facebook, there's a group called Women Poets. There's 2 places Lisa Allison suggests. But what about journals? I mean, and then there's the whole submission fees issue too. Like, I love, what is it? The American Poetry Review. But they have submission fees. I always balk at those a little bit, but maybe I'm just old fashioned. Anybody else have any other suggestions, for that first question? This is a good point though too, that Dick says most all places are welcoming. They have no idea what your pedigree is. And that is completely true. And the other thing is that it's, like people, there's a sort of a perception that it's like a club, because everybody, if you like look at the bios in the back of a literary magazine, almost everybody has an MFA. So it feels like it's like a club and you don't get to count unless you have an MFA or some kind of degree in creative writing. And that's just not true at all. That's just the lay of the land. It's just like, every editor that I've ever talked to loves having, publishing people that are not traditional, just got out of MFA or publishing poems and trying to publish books and become a professor or whatever. We love
people who have other lives and backgrounds, and everybody wants to share those poets. Like, it's like almost your gold when you find a poet that's not not an MFA type poet. So so don't feel like people are like biased against people who don't have degrees. And Kathy Shea says, I just submit everywhere I like and don't worry about the rejection, which is another great advice. Dick Westheimer says, Duotrope is a great place to research how selective a journal is. Dick Westheimer, Tim, could you repeat the name? It's Becky Touche. I think you'd say Tuch. And she has a thing called LitMag News Roundup. And she has like 1 or 2 interviews, an hour-long interview each time with an editor. I was on there like in September or so. So she's done, I'm looking at here, I'll show the YouTube screen. How about that? Where is it? There. So she's done this. So she's got this, here, Becky Touche of LitMag News Roundup. She's been doing this since like maybe June or so. So there are, I don't know how many, it doesn't say how many, but there's a whole long list of interviews with editors here. And so you can get to know some of them. And it's actually really interesting for me because I don't get to talk to many. I sort of live in my little cabin in the woods. So you can see who, what poets are like or what the editors are like. Oh, there's me. And you can see I've watched most of these. This is I think the ones that say I haven't watched them, I actually just watched them while signed into a different account. I think they're really interesting. Maybe just because I'm an editor and I get to see other people who do my job. But anyway, that's one thing. Let me look at the other questions. So question 2, do any poets edit specific lines in their poems depending on the publication they are submitting to? Do publications give a strict yes or no based on a few lines of the poem? And the answer to me is definitely not. Like if there's a poem that I like that's engaging and memorable, but there's like a line or 2 that's off, I just say, hey, we'd love to publish this, but this line is off. We got to cut that line. Is that okay? And I'm really careful not to force any kind of decisions on people. So it depends if it's something that's just like a line that really kills the poem, I will say, well, publish this if you remove that line, but that line really doesn't make it work at all. And if it's a line that I'm like, I don't really like it, but the poem is okay anyway. And maybe it's just like artistic license or whatever, then I will, I'll say, I suggest cutting that line, but let's publish the poem either way. And so I try not to be too heavy handed. Because if you rise through the ranks of the submissions and get published, it's a good poem. And so I don't think anybody, it's never based, and that's the thing. The reason why we have editing off on Submittable, like you can't do editing once you make a submission at Rattle, is because people edit, like they have these, you get some edit requests. And I was getting like 100 a day. And I'd look at what the edits actually were as people were editing their submissions that they'd already submitted. And it was like one line or one piece of punctuation or one typo. And I just do not care. And so it was such a wasting of time, of everybody's time, to have it be editable, because they weren't like big edits. They were little micro things that just did not matter at all. So one line, one typo that you notice later, don't think your poem's going to be thrown out for that. Maybe there's some sort of very picky editors that think, they didn't care enough because there's a typo. I've never met anybody like that. If the poem is awesome, it makes you want to publish it, and that's what editors are for, finding typos. So who cares? And 3, what does your editing process look like? What does it look like when your work has been declined by a publisher and you submit a new set of poems? I think she might just be talking. So most places use Submittable for now, and I wonder if literary magazines are about to be priced out of Submittable, but that's a different story. But for now, it's most places use Submittable. Like, you submitted this submission here, and what we see is the submission. And if we want to, I think if I look, I can see the poet's name. I think Megan has a different kind of account where she doesn't even see that. She just sees the poem. But I don't look at the people's names anyway, which is over on a side column. I just, actually, I can show you this too. Here, this is, if we can fit it, let's see. We can sort of fit it. So I get the pier, and this is kind of what I see. And then off to the side, I can see the poet's name if I kind of like scroll down and look. But I just read the poem. And then what I do is I print out just the poem just the file. And then if it's like close consideration, all we see is the poem. So if you resubmit after you've submitted before, you're just like somebody, it's the same as if you never submitted before. It just doesn't make a difference for us. Other people might do it differently, but that's just how we do it. So that is that. And those are the 3 questions that Nicole asked, and hopefully that's helpful to other people as well. So here's some more advice from the audience. So Sharon Friday says no degrees here. Nate Jacob says just submit everywhere, especially to journals without fees. I completely agree. Most do blind readings, so your pedigree shouldn't matter. That's good to hear, but I just don't know these things anymore. The work generally should stand on its own. Lisa Ellison says, I don't have an MFA or any formal experience either. Nicole, feel free to reach out. And this is Lisa Allison here. I know what you mean. She also says, researching the journal is critical. Read issues to get a sense of whether your work is a fit. Duotrope publishes interviews with many of the editors. Duotrope is a good suggestion. Another thing, I think maybe because I sort of, grew up feeling poor, at least. I really hate things that have fees. And so Duotrope, I used to recommend them all the time. But now that you have to subscribe, I just wish they would do like some kind of ad and fundraising sort of model instead of having a subscription. Because or maybe a really cheap subscription, but it seems like the subscription's pretty high. Which is why, even though everyone's mentioning Duotrope, I tend not to anymore. Because for the first 5 or 10 years of Duotrope, it was free, and you could pay for an extra account, but you could still have the functionality with another one, I think, or how it worked, maybe. And then I think they would have fundraising drives or something like that. But then they switched to this: you only get access with a subscription, and that ruined. There was a great thing where it showed your actual response times and how much comparing different magazines to each other. And when it was free, it was sort of like a better like sample of the writing population. But once it became a fee-based system, all that data sort of becomes invalid because it's just the cohort of people that can pay a subscription fee, which sort of changes the what the data is telling you. So it sort of stopped working for that function either. So I just kind of ignore Submittable or Duotrope at this point. Although they are nice. I mean, if you can pay I don't know how much it is, but if you can pay that, it's nice service to know what magazines are out there and get a sense of the editors too. So let's see where. Oh yeah, here. We'll go on. So Kathy Shea says, I love Duotrope and use it. Clayton Clark says, thanks for asking the question for the helpful answers, everyone. Dick Westheimer says, I edited out a profanity for a submission that was to appear in an anthology once. That's interesting. One thing that I have come across recently is that social media are really, if you use profanity in a post or certain keywords. So I always post the Rattles Daily Poem, and I excerpt part of the poem. But if there's profanity or some kind of sensitive thing in the title of the post of the poem, or in the excerpt, nobody sees it, and which makes sense. Some people get offended and they don't want people to be offended by what they're shown, but the algorithm really ramps it down, so that does play more of an impact maybe than it ever did. Dick Westheimer says no degree here in plenty of pubs. Dick definitely does. Tim he also says many places now you have to pay to submit poems. The economics of getting poems out there is crazy. Yeah, that's the thing. I've always not liked, because I think we're nonprofits and we're providing a service which is building up literature, and if you're charging fees, it becomes a question of what service are you providing. But anyway, that's a whole long side topic, and people don't like it when I talk about it sometimes. Anyway, those are the advice that everybody has. So thanks for everybody for your advice. And everybody's talking about Duotrope, so apparently people still use it. So you can check that out. Another great place is NewPages. I really like them. Now, NewPages, and I try to support them as much as I can because what they do is free with sort of extra things for fees and donations and things like that too. So they're... It's another great resource. Similar to Duotrope, they don't have the data. But like I was saying, the data on Duotrope isn't as accurate as it used to be either.
So this is NewPagescom, and they have these guides to literary magazines and writing contests, and they just offer so much. They Casey and Denise Hill are the two people who edit this, and they just do a wonderful job of compiling things. So it's a really great resource as well. It's NewPages.com. If anybody has any other resources, let me know and I'll pass them along. But that's one thing I would recommend. Another place is for contests. What is it? Winning writers. We promote our contests here. They do a good job of if you do want to enter contests, they have listings of like what's free and what's not, and what's legitimate and what's not, and what's scams. They have whole scam busting topics. Adam, what's his name? Adam, I can't remember his last name, but he's the one who mainly runs it, and we advertise in their newsletter. They have a really nice newsletter for the Rattle Poetry Prize and stuff. So if you're interested in contests, this is a really good resource, winningwriters.com, that'll show you sort of where the real ones are and where the fake ones are. And they have this great, they have the best free literary contests. So they have listings of what's free. And they also have a really fun one of their own, which I just love, which is the Wurgle Flomp Humor Contest, which is sort of very funny stuff comes out of here. So that's winning writers. Those are the things, and I'm kind of out of date because I used to participate more in literary stuff and pay more attention, and now I'm just so busy with running Rattle, and I don't submit my own work anywhere. So I don't know what's going on. So if anybody has any suggestions, leave them in the chat windows, and that'll be helpful to Nicole and anybody else who watches later. So we got to move on, and this is the next poet. And Kimberly McNeil, she sent 3 short poems here, and we might as well go through them. She didn't have any questions. So, oops. I don't know why I did that. I just threw away the other poem in the recycling bin. Sorry about that. So I can't show it later. But anyway, Kimberly McNeil, Friend Store. Someday in the future, there will be a friend store with long lines at the register called Possibility, lanes 1 through 4. No more waiting for an invite, a phone call, or text message date. This meat market promises unpopular solipsistic winners who will steal your heart. Friend store. So that is, I love the concept of this poem, actually. I think, and I think this is something that we're going through as a society that is sort of unacknowledged and needs to be written about a lot more, which is loneliness, and the idea that we, it's just the fact that with the internet, there's just not a lot of social connection in the way that we are evolved to have. And there are a lot of lonely people out there. And so this sort of hits on that vein a little bit. I love the title, Friend Store. Someday in the future, there will be a friend store. I just love that concept with long lines at the register called Possibility. So these are great. The opening is great. No more waiting for an invite, a phone call, or text message date. This meat market promises unpopular solipsistic winners who will steal your heart. And so, but then here I feel like the poem kind of goes off the rails. So I feel like it sort of had great promise in the idea. But instead of going to, again, similar to what we talked about with the last poem, it's the details that make things come alive and make us think and engage and remember poems. And so in the sort of philosophizing or the that kind of rhetoric isn't as engaging as having sort of a scene to play with in your mind or something. And so if we take here and we just keep describing what's going on at the friend store, I mean, you could just go on forever describing what a friend store would look like. And then through those descriptions of how it would look like and how it would operate, you could get to the points that you want to share about the world. And so this is a poem just with a great opportunity to, just delete this whole section and write it in a way that enters that store and describes it and lets us feel it and look around and see what's on the shelves and things. That's a really cool idea, though. I like it a lot. And Nate Jacob here puts it this way: Friend Store went too quickly from hopeful to dour. Maybe I'm just looking for hope. Yeah, that's true too. I mean, it's the same kind of thing. It just sort of went in this place that was like, this is how I feel, instead of like
letting us move through this store. And Sharon Frenzy puts it this way, maybe describe the possibilities. Just describe this stuff and let that tell the story. Over on YouTube, Spartacus says, feels authentic. I like the skinny format presentation on the page. That is one thing that works really nice. The and Naima Kirkana says Black Mirror feel. I love Black Mirror. They need to do more episodes. Although it's like the most depressing, scary, science fiction ever. But Friend Store. And so there is a nice pacing to this. And someday there's a nice sense of sort of the weight of each line, like sort of dropping like heavy stones or something. Someday in the future there will be a Friend Store. So just really great use of this skinny format, as Spartacus points out. I agree. And Nylema says meat market is cliche too. Yeah, don't use cliches as you're moving through and describing the store. But start in the store, enter it, show us what's going on, use your imagination, creativity, and that's what we will love. Clayton Clark says, right, I want to see what's in the aisles. Exactly. Let's see. Cliches aside, says Dick Westheimer, I like this one a lot. I see it, feel it, will remember it. Yeah. So let me see. Over on Facebook, I should put these next to each other. Okay. Sharon Frenny says, yes, I love the setup. Yeah, so that's just this for this poem. Let's go to the next one. It's a little longer. And like I said, we have 3. This is, again, Kimberly McNeil, The Jello Tree of Grey Gardens. The mold of the bitch who had lived there the longest semi-solidified into a gelatinous tree shape, an amorphous blue form positioned at the garden's front gate, where she wobbled and wiggled like jello, twisting and jiggling, struggling to be free. Eternally grateful that she no longer had to teach Intro to Common Sense class 5 days a week. It was that Friday in November when the big man arrived. He was fanning his face as he squinted his eyes, disturbed by the dysmorphic blue tree disguise, now dripping and bobbing chaotically. But the man knew all about her trickery, her refusal to leave, her eccentricity. So he decided to share for a modest cash fee his recipe for refreshing ecstasy iced tea. His mind now open and tolerance-free, he straddled the blue puddle that once was she, the misunderstood woman, Grey Garden's legacy. That's interesting. So this poem moves in and out of some really interesting details and images that are really sort of engaging and gripping. And then sometimes I'm sort of a little lost, too, at the same time. So let's sort of look into that. And let's see. Where Oh, I didn't even notice that. Yeah. So Kathy Shea says I wouldn't capitalize the first word of each line to formal. I didn't even notice that, actually. It's kind of funny. Anyway. The Jello Tree of Grey Gardens. The mold of the bitch who had lived there the longest. So we get Grey Gardens, the Jello Tree of Grey Gardens. It's such an evocative title. I love that title. The mold of the bitch who lived there the longest, semi-solidified into a gelatinous tree shape. An amorphous blue form positioned at the garden's front gate. We get a nice little rhyme from the gate and shape, little near rhyme there. And I this amorphous blue form positioned at the garden's front gate. I mean, really nice, nice image there. Like where it's really evocative. Where she wobbled and wiggled like jello, twisting and jiggling. I think maybe like jello. We already had jello in the title. And, wiggling like jello is a bit of a cliche too, so let's get rid of that. But still, where she wobbled and wiggled, twisting and jiggling, struggling to be free. Eternally grateful that she, and again we get the she free, a nice little rhyme there, no longer had to teach Intro to Common Sense class. I feel like I at this point, I sort of, it's a strange turn, and it kind of threw me a little bit. Eternally grateful that she no longer had to teach Intro to Common Sense class 5 days a week. And so I think at this point, if you want to make this turn here, I think we need to know more about the class and more about the teacher, and like what was going on. So there's sort of like a hole right here where you don't go into enough detail about what this teaching was. And so it feels, and then we just jump away from it again to the big man
whoever that is. And so I feel a little lost at that point. But if you describe the teaching a little bit, like if you just with some description, eternally grateful that she no longer had to teach and wrote a common sense class 5 days a week at the blah, 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 in front of the blah, blah, blah. There's like a space there where you can describe what that is a little bit, that we won't feel a little as lost by it. So I'd add something there. Or you can not go in that direction either, but the way it is, it's like a detour that you don't follow. It was that Friday in November when the big man arrived. He was fanning his face. So this is where I get lost. It was Friday in November when the big man arrived. He was fanning his face as he squinted his eyes, disturbed by the dysmorphic blue tree disguise. Come, we get a lot of nice little rhymes there. Now dripping and bobbing chaotically, but the man knew all about her trickery, her refusal to leave, her eccentricity. So he decided to share for a modest cash fee his recipe for refreshing ecstasy iced tea. His mind now open and intolerance free. I do like the ecstasy iced tea. His mind now open. He straddled the blue puddle that once was she, the misunderstood woman, Greg Garden's legacy. So it kind of works toward the end again. So there's this thing like the big man. I don't know how to connect that. Like who is that and what's the significance? I like the story of this woman who jiggled like Jello at the front gate of the garden, and then I sort of like the general plot, and then melted by, I guess, he gave her iced tea which melted her, or ecstasy tea. I don't know. It's a strange story and really interesting. I just feel a little lost in it. Let's see. And Nylema Carcana says interesting speculative fiction and poetry, textured. Yeah. And Nate Jacobs says, Jello Tree leaves me wondering what is going on. It has great sound and clever images, but I have no idea of who is what exactly. But I really do like the sounds and rhymes. Interesting, exactly. So really, I don't even need to say much. I could just share these poems and read the comments, and everybody sort of understands what's going on. Because you're all great. But yeah, that's the thing. I just, again, similar to Sharon Friday says, very cool, but I have no clue. Similar to the Friend Store poem, there's just so much more to offer here. So many more places you can go to tell the whole story. And part of it maybe is that the big man, or the man capitalized and calling it the big man, it makes it seem like we should know who that is. If it was just a man arrived, then I think we would be more forgiving of that. So that could be a simple sort of, if it's just a woman and just a man and just a story. I'm trying to think of a poet who might write like this to be an example of. Or a poem that might. I don't know. Nothing's popping to mind, which is great because that means that you're doing something more original. But there's a way that you could tell it a little bit more instead of, bitch and the big man, make it seem like they're characters that the character is the issue. But there's a way, like in The Road, or just general. I think maybe most Cormac McCarthy novels. But in The Road, I know it's just the two characters are just the man and the boy, and we don't really get a lot of detail. There's sort of because it's about the story and what's going on, and in a way that their old names don't matter or whatever, in the new dystopia that they're walking through. But there's a way that you could tell it without emphasizing the character as much, and that emphasizes the story more, and we'd be more forgiving of not knowing the details that surround this encounter. So maybe that's one thing to think about too in this, as you try to find out a way to tell the story a little bit better. But also no longer grateful for having to teach. Like a lot of times I talk about how important it is to have detail. Which it is in most cases, but sometimes detail throws you off in a direction that makes you need more detail to sort of connect all the details. And so if you're going to have a more sparse poem, sometimes that works a little better, especially in sort of a fiction type space like this. Sharon Friday says the title is great. This poem could be awesome. I wrote one similar about a jester in my bed, a dream poem. Who I guess I'm thinking of. I thought of something I could show. What is his name? I had to remember his name now, or a way to let me see. It's like Dave. Oh gosh, Dan. Let me think of a title. Oh, what is his name? Gosh, my brain is slow to turn on. He just sent us one of his new books too. I was thinking about having it on the Rattlecast. Can I reach? David James, that's it. Yeah. So let's see. David James. Let's show you one of these David James poems for how to tell a story. Let me see. Let's try to find the shortest one. Oops, hang on. Well, I guess I'll just do this one. So this is The Gold Dream. And this is how he tells a story. Well, maybe that's not a good example. Where is, let's see. There's one I'm looking for in particular. Not The Gold Dream, because it's like a he and a she. Where are you? Here it is. This is what I was thinking of. This is how to make amends. Finally, sorry for the delay. It's how to make amends. Actually, it's a minute. Let me just have David James read it for you. Why not? And we'll see how the audio is, but it's an older poem.
How to make amends. He was hungry, so he ate the couch, the one with the pull-out bed. Of course, when his wife came home, she was disgusted. Now what will we sit on, asshole? Last week it was the coffee table. The week before, 2 kitchen chairs and a lamp. What next? The bed? He hadn't thought of eating the bed, but the idea was appealing. It probably would taste like sleep, comfort food. He couldn't respond to her. She was always right. So he went upstairs to lie down. Somehow the bed knew what was coming. It shivered in fear. The man stroked the mattress, saying, "Don't worry, I won't eat you, I promise." As the bed settled down, the man fell asleep and dreamed of eating the bed, mattress, baseboard, springs, pillows. He stuffed everything in his mouth, chewing, crunching, swallowing until he could no longer stand up. He laid there on the floor in the bedroom. When his wife came home after work, she undressed, climbed on top of him, slid under some loose sheets, and slept. His chest rose and fell in time to her steady breathing. Wrapping himself around her, he knew she would be next. He would eat her, and finally there would be peace between them, which was all he ever really wanted.
Yeah, so that was David James with How to Make Amends. And that poem, see how the, it's just he ate the couch. This weird things are happening, like in the Jello Tree poem. And then there's a she, and it's a husband and a wife, but we don't get any details about them. He goes off to work or comes home from work or whatever, and it doesn't say what the work is. There's no name. There's no personal details. And that's sort of a sudden fiction or flash fiction technique that you see a lot in that genre, where there are really strict word counts. And this is almost just a flash fiction. You can almost not even call it a poem. There's a question about even, I remember thinking, is this a poem enough? And I think it is, but it's a prose poem. But the border is very, very flimsy between the two. But the problem is with flash fiction or sudden fiction, as they would call it, is you have just little space, and so you can't have any distractions. And so there are a lot of these surreal, really fun, interesting stories. There's a whole sudden fiction anthology that I love. And the stories are all like a page or two at most. And there's just no room to have all this like side detail. And if you introduce any side detail, then it's like some avenue that you can't really go down because there's no time to go down it. And I think the same thing applies to this poem here. So the Jello Tree of Grey Gardens, we have the bitch and we have the big man, and that's a little too much detail. And we have the fact that she worked at a class. If it was just a person we didn't know anything about their backgrounds, it would let the story itself of the Jello and the way that she sort of melted at the end work better, I would say. So that's my suggestion here for this one, is to sort of strip away excess detail, which is the opposite of advice I usually give. But in a story like this, I think that's good advice. Let's see. So we're running up on time, but we'll look at this last poem too. Let me see if there's any other comments to share. The reality of the man, this is Jenny Middleton, the reality of the man and the Jello woman are hidden, perhaps because this is what they are aspiring for. That's interesting. There's a sense of boldness overlaying uncertainty implied throughout the descriptions of the characters in this poem, I think. Interesting comment, Jenny. Okay, so let's look at the last one really quickly. This is what I learned in Key West. What I learned in Key West. Key West tourist. Metaphoric everyman. Nobody cares what you think. No one listens to you. Give up and realize that no one gives a shit. The only thing that matters is how you look. Nobody cares what you create either. Daydreamed speeches with standing ovations, choreographed movements, sunbathing. The freshest what to wear is all they notice. Nobody cares what you write, because nobody reads it. Too many words, not enough strife. Later in life when you're uncomfortably fat, a company man and a networking brat, even who you know will no longer matter. Is what I learned in Key West. Interesting. So this one I think is the most complete, sort of ready to go poem of the three here. What I learned in Key West. Key West tourist. Metaphoric everyman. Nobody cares what you think. So this is we really get a sense of what's going on pretty easily by the way it's set up. What I learned in Key West, and then we're a Key West tourist. So the speaker went to Key West and then sort of learned this advice. And so there's no like sort of I'm lost in this poem. It's straightforward with what's going on. And then the nobody cares what you think is one of those other great simple lines. And even though it's and I wouldn't call it cliche, but it's a sort of a common utterance. It works really well. No one listens to you. Give up and realize that no one gives a shit. The only thing that matters is how you look. Nobody cares what you create either. Daydream speeches with standing ovations. So the nobody, I think I would probably, I would cut this because that's just I think that's kind of a boring observation. Nobody cares what you create either. Daydream speeches with standing ovations, choreographed movements, sunbathing. So these are great descriptions of kind of what this is, which is why I don't need it. The freshest what to wear is all they notice. Nobody cares what you write. Because nobody reads it. Or maybe just nobody reads. I don't know. Too many words, not enough strife. And later in life, when you're uncomfortably fat, a company man and networking brat, even who you know will no longer matter. I think I sort of, there's a sort of a, I don't know, very strong mood, sort of a venom coming out of this poem that I think works. So I think that sort of works pretty well. Let's see. For the last poem, Corey Zeller. So this is Nylema Karkanis with a suggestion that Corey Zeller tells surreal stories in poetry. So that'd be a good thing to look at. And Nylema Karkanis says, proof Rocky, you could give thoughts as dialogue. Yeah, this is interesting. So again, all three of these poems, I would say, leave me wanting a little more. Like I feel like they could all go on in more like dig deeper into their topics. It's almost like the exit ramp is too quick. And I don't know. I think this one too, although it's sort of the closest to being complete, I still feel like we could go into more of this sort of the choreographed movements and the daydream speeches. I'd like to see kind of more of that. Daniel Mass says sad pedestrian. And Nalima Kirkana says proof Rocky. He could give thoughts as dialogue. Interesting. So I think, let me see. Sharon Fronte points out she is a title master. Great titles on Kimberly's poems. Yeah, I agree. Good titles. And actually, the you can sort of see the title in progress because the Friends store had a different title. And then the one thing when I said we're going to go over these, I don't have it up anymore, but Kimberly said change the title to Friends store. And the titles are great, all three of these. So anyway, that is it for today. Once again, I hope you, thank you for joining me on your Christmas Eve if you celebrate Christmas Eve, and hope you have a happy holidays, whatever you celebrate. We're about to go do our Christmas stuff. Coming up on the Rattlecast, we are still rolling for Sunday, and the guest is going to be... Where's the button? There's a guest. Jose A. I don't know how to say his last name. I have to ask him tomorrow when we talk. Jose A. Alcantara? What do you say? Alcantara? Jose A. Alcantara. That's Rattlecast number 124. His newest book is The Bitten World, or his first book, I should say. He was the winner of the Neil Postman Award for Metaphor for his poem Divorce. And we've published maybe a half dozen or more of his poems, and they're all outstanding. He's one of my favorite sort of... undiscovered, maybe you could say, poets. And so it was really cool to have him, have this first book come out finally from Teapot Bach. He's a Colorado-based poet and worked a lot of jobs. Speaking of people who don't have MFAs, I'm not sure that he does, but I know he's worked in a whole bunch of things. It's like I can't remember what his bio says in the note, but a whole bunch of different jobs, bookstores and plumbing and things like that. And as a fisherman, too, a professional fisherman, I think. And but he's a slightly formal, sometimes not. Great sense of line and image and metaphor, of course, for winning the Neil Postman Award for Metaphor. Check out his poem Divorce, which is just great, among many other great poems. But that is The Bitten World, his new book. Rattlecast number 124, Jose Alcantara. Sunday, December 26th, the regular time, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. And the prompt for this week was to write a poem about the winter solstice. So it's a pretty open-ended style-wise, but write about the winter solstice, which was just a few days ago. And that'll be your prompt for this week, and that'll be your Rattlecast this week, number 124. See you then on Sunday. Hope you have a great holiday, and I will talk to you then. Goodbye.